Today's title is Celebrating Those Who Fought for a Cause. Today I want you to listen carefully to learn how we remember the people that you have just learned about who have all fought for a cause. You have listened to the stories of 7 extraordinary or amazing people who dedicated their lives to making sure that all Americans have equal rights. These great Americans were able to bring about changes that resulted in new, fairer laws. They were able to do this because the United States, since its creation, has had a democratic form of government. This means that the citizens of the United States are involved in the process. People can vote for political leaders who represent their interests and needs. It took a while for every American adult to gain the right to vote, but eventually it did happen. Now, each person has an equal say in deciding what kind of government they want. In order to vote in the United States, a person must be 18 years old and a citizen. That means he or she must have been born in the United States, have parents who are American citizens, or have been granted citizenship. People who are granted citizenship are called naturalized citizens. Naturalized citizens are people who are born in another country but have chosen to become citizens in the United States. Every 2 years and every 4 years, important elections are held. People go to places called polls to vote. As you have learned, the right to vote is called suffrage. Voters can decide who should lead their state and who should lead the nation. They can help decide if taxes or money should be raised by the government to pay for important things communities need, such as hospitals, schools, and libraries, or whether taxes should be reduced so that people have a little more money to spend. These are important choices that affect all Americans. Suffrage is a way of making sure that the government is following the wishes of the people that it serves. Today, we take for granted that adult American citizens have the right to vote. We hardly think about it at all. But if you have heard about the journey that people long ago went on to make this a reality, you have also heard about the obstacles that were placed in their paths along the way. Let's now review the lives of the brave people you have just learned about. What was Susan B. Anthony famous for? Susan B. Anthony worked to expand women's rights in America, especially the right to vote. A woman must not depend upon the protection of a man, but must be taught to protect herself, she said once. Susan was a famous leader of the women's rights movement. Sadly, Susan did not live to see the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1920, which made it legal for women to vote. Without Susan's efforts, however, the battle for women's rights might not have gone on much longer. Eleanor Roosevelt worked to improve the civil rights and human rights of many groups of people in the United States. During the Great Depression, Eleanor worked tirelessly to help those most in need. Eleanor believed that all people should be treated fairly and equally, and with respect. Later in her life, Eleanor worked for the United Nations. She took her message of freedom and equality all over the world. Mary McLeod Bethune worked to create educational opportunities for African Americans, especially girls, during the time of segregation. Mary opened a school that eventually became a 4-year college, and she helped many African American men gain the skills they needed to be able to vote. Mary worked closely with Eleanor Roosevelt and a talented team of African American advisors to improve opportunities for all Americans. It is said that Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. He became the first African American to play Major League Baseball. When Branch Rickey, the president of the Brooklyn Dodgers, invited Jackie to play for his team, they both knew that they were attempting to change people's attitudes and end discrimination in American sports. In 1947, when Jackie played his first major league game at Ebbets Field, he proved that he was not only an incredible baseball player, but he was also a man who had great courage. Jackie made the world a better place. At the end of Jackie's first season with the Brooklyn Dodgers, he was chosen to be the Rookie of the Year, and baseball was finally integrated so that people of any race could play together. On that cold December night in 1955, when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, the world changed. Rosa's actions led to the Montgomery bus boycott. The power of so many people coming together to end unfair laws ultimately led to the end of legal segregation in the South. Today, many people feel that the civil rights movement really began in the moment when Rosa said no. That is why Rosa is called the mother of the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the peaceful leader of the civil rights movement. He led the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. Martin promoted change and the achievement of equal rights through nonviolence. Martin's powerful speeches changed people's hearts and minds. He led the way to change laws that were 100 years old, allowing African Americans to fully participate in American society. As a nation, we honor Martin's work each year on the third Monday of January. Cesar Chavez was once a migrant worker. Members of his family were migrant workers too. During those years, Cesar became very aware of how hard life could be for people without any rights or protections. Migrant workers worked long hours for little pay. They often lived in overcrowded camps. Migrant workers could rarely afford health care. Cesar vowed to change all of this. He dedicated his life to making sure that all farm workers, including migrant workers, had certain basic rights. Cesar brought people together and created a labor union called the National Farm Workers Association. Eventually, through his efforts, Cesar succeeded in getting better pay and working conditions for all migrant workers. Without his determined leadership, these things might have never happened. Today, there are many people who work to make sure everyone in the United States is treated fairly and that their rights are respected. Just as one example, it is important that people who have disabilities and who are challenged physically or mentally are treated fairly and equally too. People with disabilities might have trouble seeing or hearing or walking. They might need to use wheelchairs, walkers, hearing aids, or service dogs. They may have special devices to help them talk on a telephone, or they may use service dogs to guide them along sidewalks and into buildings. On July 26, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed a new law called the Americans with Disabilities Act. This law gives protection to people with disabilities. For one thing, this law states that all people should be allowed easier access to all of the places people enjoy going to, such as restaurants, movie theaters, libraries, and other buildings and public places. This law also states that public transportation, such as buses and trains, must have paths and entries that are easy to manage, such as ramps, lifts, or elevators. This law also offers help to those people who have diseases that are not curable and diseases that make it hard for people to take care of themselves. And so, you see, it's important that we stand up and recognize when people are being treated unfairly. We have just one world that we all share together. No person, because of the color of their skin, no cultural group or religious group, should ever be treated unfairly. We have a responsibility to treat all human beings with dignity and respect. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter.